Hello and welcome to the August 2019 Sunshine Summit. My name is Heather and I am your host. I host a podcast called the Sunshine and Power Cuts podcast, and this week, in association with Geeks Rising, I'm bringing to you a week of live streams to recognize and celebrate connections. This is day 3. We've been joined by some incredible guests so far, but today it is with a warm welcome that I bring on Chris Green from the Gravity Beard podcast and Underdog podcast community. Welcome to the Sunshine Summit, Chris.
Hey, Heather, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I think it's really fun that I was just going to say, I think it's really fun that it's Monday here, but it's Tuesday where you are.
That is always fun. Being in the future is a little bit tricky, but I'm glad that it worked out and that you're able to be here and be part of the Sunshine Summit today. Thank you so much. I wanted to share the amazing connections that you've made because you've got the Gravity Beard podcast, which I'd love for you to share with others. But the Underdog podcast community has been an undercurrent theme throughout the other Sunshine Summit events that we've had. This is our 4th one, and we've had a lot of members from that group be a part of the event. But also, I know that there are a lot of connections that are made within it. So if you wanted to start maybe with the Underdog podcast community, that would be amazing, and tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Sure. Well, like a handful of things I've done in podcasting, it happened a little bit impulsively. I don't even remember. Really, I started the group because I'd come from another group. And what I realized was it didn't seem like there was, I mean, there's a lot of podcast groups on Facebook. You know, if you want to connect with other podcasters, there's a lot of ways to do that. But it was one of those strange things where you stumble across something that you thought should exist, but for some reason it didn't. And what didn't exist was a group that was specifically just for and exclusively for independent podcasters. And so I didn't know what would happen. I'd made a few friends in podcasting. And I thought, I'm just going to start a group just for those people, and I'll just gather people as I go, as I meet them. But it didn't take very long before it kind of took on a life of its own and just started growing pretty quickly. So, it got to a few hundred, relatively fast. And then, before you know, it's over 1,000 or 2,000. I think now it's just under 2,400. So it was really just something that I'd gathered a few friends like we all do in podcasting and started this group and just kind of expressed to everybody, hey, there's not a home for independent podcasters. That's what this is. And then it just grew much faster than I think we thought it would.
Yeah. How many anniversaries of the group have there been so far? Because I know one was just recently celebrated. How long?
Yeah, I think 3. I think 3.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is about 2,400 people in there, 2,400 people. It's amazing. There are a lot of connections that happen in there. It's a space where I think when I started, there was a question asked about if you're sort of not super active in the group, how does the group make you feel? And I chimed in on that one and said that even if I'm not totally active there all of the time, it's got this very good ambience. And I think that comes about from the way that you've curated the group, but also how it's moderated and just the people who are part of it who are willing and to share and make genuine connections within that.
Well, I think first of all, I'm very thrilled to hear you say that because that was, I mean, that's the place where I come from. I think this is going to come up a lot in our conversation. But everything I do, especially in and around podcasting, I try to do it in an as inclusive way possible. And so that's just kind of how I approach most things. But if you take a couple of steps back, when I got into podcasting, I didn't expect to stumble across a huge community of people. I just thought, because it got on the outset, it seemed like kind of an isolating hobby, because you set up your equipment, you talk in your microphone, you stop talking, you produce your audio, you release your audio. I didn't know that there was I was pleasantly surprised, is what I would say, to discover that this hobby, and I'm an introvert, so that kind of was okay with me. But when I discovered that there's this huge community of really nice and encouraging and supporting people, I was really happy to discover that. It was a huge bonus. And I think that's what led me to, so I started on Twitter, but Twitter's fine and we all use it as a tool, but everybody on there is anonymous. Mm-hmm. On Facebook, you see faces and names and people become actual people. And so you begin to connect with these people, and then you realize, now I'm connecting with people in every English speaking part of the world. And it just makes a big world a much smaller place. Those are some things that came along with podcasting that really caught me by surprise in a really good way.
That's awesome. It does feel a little bit isolating. And I know that there's a bit of a theme that a lot of us podcasters are introverts, but we do like to feel a part of something bigger and to know that there are people out there who can support us. Just on that note, we've got some people in the live chat. We've got American Liberty, John and Eldersbro, and Phil Rude is there. Hey guys, welcome. If you have any questions or stories of connections that you've made through the Underdog podcast community or with the Gravity Beard podcast, let us know. That would be really handy. But yeah, it's surprising the kind of people that are out there in podcasting, and I love that they've sort of found your group and have been a part of it and participate in a great way. Recently, you've been asking some really thoughtful questions to help get people engaged in there, and I love that it's not about self-promotion as such. There is a self-promotion thread where you can put in what you've been up to, and it's really good to catch what everybody's been up to and working on. But the questions that you pose and that others pose in there, or when they're looking for support, are really awesome and really valuable.
Well, again, thank you. That's candidly pulling back the curtain. For people that have been in the group a little while, they know this, but we just made that change. We didn't want to be super uptight about promoting your podcast, but when you get a group that size, it begins to dominate, a Facebook feed, just because everyone's trying so hard to build an audience. And I respect that, and I have the same struggle. But then we realized that the feed just becomes all promotion. And so very recently we made that change where we basically stripped the feed of promotions entirely, except for a single thread. And because we wanted to return to it being a community and being a place for discussion and being a resource to podcasters. And so that's just something we did a few weeks ago. And I think it was something that everybody wanted, and the change has been really well received. And I just recently posted, a few questions, but I really want to invite and encourage everybody to do that. If something's on your mind, because that's the other thing that I discovered is because it's not just an isolating hobby. It is people that are engaged in this thing together. We are a community. And the other thing is there is a lot of emotion, around, and a lot of passion that people put into their shows. And there's this unending stream of creativity that everybody has that, I'm having conversations like this all the time with other podcasters. If they're working on one or two shows, they're only doing that because that's all they have time for. They probably have 100 ideas that they'd love to launch. Once you get into the hobby, the wheels just start turning. You come up with so many ideas, and you have passion behind them. And so the questions, and then there's challenges. I asked a question about pod fading, and the things that are challenging, because everybody is excited about their show. They want their show to continue, but they hit these walls or they hit these things. And it's not just technical problems. It's not what microphone I should use. It's man, I'm really having trouble juggling, my personal life with my podcast, because podcasting is more time consuming than I expected, or my family is growing, and I'm feeling a little guilty about spending so much time with my podcast. And these are real things. These are real personal things, that have emotions and stuff around them that come with struggles. And those are very important conversations to have too, not just the execution of a podcast.
Yeah. And not just celebrating the highs, because there'll be people in the group who are feeling the lows and going through those struggles, and it kind of helps lift them up and let people know that, it is a thing that is normal to go through, or that lots of people do go through, and what their experiences are around it. And it just helps, I think, make the whole thing real and feel like you can resonate with whichever aspect you're on, because we're all on different journeys. We might have started at different times. We might have, even though we're independent podcasters, we might just be at a different place on the journey. And so, being able to ask all of those questions, and with all the facets that there are and the points that we might be at on those journeys, to be able to talk about them is really good. Phil in the chat said the Underdog. Sorry.
Nothing. We'll get to that in just a second. I was just going to say, you hit on something really important. I want the group to be a place where we're celebrating highs and lows. If you're at a low point and you need encouragement and support, we want this to be the place where you get it. But also, I want people to feel free and not self-conscious about going on there and sharing a victory, no matter how big or how small. Hey, maybe it's a show that's not driving a lot of listens, and they just hit 300 listens or 1,000 listens or whatever. Come share that. That's what community is you get to share victories and the low points. And both are really important to do with other people, so you don't feel isolated in this thing, because you don't have to be.
Definitely. Phil said the Underdogs is great just because it's a community of makers helping each other and sharing techniques. No one is hoarding information there. It's very open, and people are very genuine in their response. And I noticed that particularly with Derek Graziano one time, and that's how he ended up being on one of the earlier Sunshine Summits, was just the way that he interacted with people in that group really stood out for me. So yeah, hats off to you for making an amazing group, and for the people who are part of it that make it the group that it is.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. American Liberty, I've just got to ask you, he asked, the names are so intriguing. Is there a backstory behind the names? And I'm not sure what names you're referring to. But Phil also said the Gravity Beard Interns group is just insane fun. It's all about laughing at absurdity. Oh gosh. I am hung up on absurdity, and it's great to be a part of it. So you host a show yourself. It's called the Gravity Beard Podcast, and as part of that, you have conversations with other people. How many episodes are you through that show? I didn't look before.
I think we're coming up on 214. We've our anniversary. We just passed our 3rd anniversary, and so I think I was wrong about the group. I think the group's been around for 2 years. My podcast has been around for 3 years, and so I think we just passed 2. We're about to hit 214.
Awesome. And you've had a lot of conversations along the way and made a lot of connections, I'd say, through those conversations. How have you gone about having them, or finding the people to share their stories?
Okay, so out of that number of episodes, I think we've done about 40 or 45 interviews.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about my show, about Gravity Beard, is that it's also designed with 2 things in mind. One, I wanted to create a show where I was never painted into a corner creatively, where I could take a sharp left turn and do something almost completely different, and the audience wouldn't think that was strange. So, so I did a series of episodes where I did podcast bloopers, and then that kind of ran its course, and I moved on from that. Sometimes I do interviews. Sometimes I do roundtable discussions. Sometimes we actually have a kind of a parallel show, which is what Phil was referring to, which is it's a talk show segmented style show where the content is curated 100% out of our Facebook group. And that runs alongside the original version of the show, which is just Gravity Beard. And so one, I didn't want to be painted into a creative corner. And every time I came up with a new idea, I didn't want to have to start a new podcast because I can't do that. But I'm constantly coming up with new ideas. And so the show was designed to be kind of an open format. First for myself, because I didn't know I was going to meet a bunch of amazing creative people in the hobby. But secondly, when I realized now I've made a bunch of friends that I really love and I respect them and they're incredibly talented, then I just opened up, that segmented talk show and just the podcast as a whole, because some of these people that I know are doing niche shows. They're doing a movie podcast, or Paul Choma does one about animals, or whatever it may be, and he doesn't have a platform, or people like that don't have a platform to test out or just do fun ideas for a short period of time. I don't know if it was Keith from Pop-Up Filmcast or Derek Graziano. Somebody just came to me recently and said, "Hey, have you ever played D&D? Can we do 3 or 4 episodes on your show where we just play D&D?" Well, I've never played D&D, never played it once.
Neither
but
have I.
when they came to me with that idea, I said, sure, why not? Because I can do 4 episodes of a live round of D&D on my show, and the listeners don't think that's strange. So it's kind of been, it's very specifically designed as an open format for me to do what I need, but also to offer that up to other really talented friends that I have in the podcast community to bring their ideas that don't need to be a whole podcast. They're just something we could do for a few episodes and have fun with it and then move on.
That is awesome. There is a little blurb that I read, serious conversations about the dumbest things ever, which just struck my attention. Is that for the Gravity Beard podcast or the intern group?
Well, it's a little bit of both. It came from the group. We do something in the group called elimination polls, which is something that was created by Paul Chomo. And during one of the elimination polls, he and I were having a text exchange, and we realized that we were having a really serious conversation about something completely ridiculous. And he texted that to me. He said Paul's actual text to me, this is a really serious conversation about the dumbest thing ever. Mm-hmm. And then it just occurred to me, that's what the whole group is about. And in a lot of ways, that's what the podcast is about. It's just a place where we're a bunch of grown adults who lead very serious lives and have a lot of really serious responsibilities, can just put that aside for a little while and act like children, because we all need that. And so we go in there and we have really serious conversations about the best things ever. We're currently doing an elimination poll about everyone's favorite sandwich. And we're all kind of going at each other's throats and acting like we're serious about it, and then it'll be over, and then we'll move on to the next thing. But
Phil
that's
Rhodes,
the kind of the absurdity behind the group.
That is awesome. That's a fun way of engaging with each other and keeping the interest in and being playful, and I think that's really important. And Phil said, "Grilled cheese for life, #elimination poll."
Well, I meant to acknowledge Phil earlier. Phil is a very active member of the group, and he's a very smart, funny person. So I'm very thankful for someone like him in there, because Phil is a great example, and some of these other people that we've referenced, Paul and Keith and these others, are great examples of what makes my podcast, and especially that group, as enjoyable as it is. It doesn't happen without them, right? You can't do this alone. We've collected a group of fun people, and I'm very thankful for them all to be there.
Yeah. Aside from the elimination polls, it is amazing to have that supportive network group part of the group. Paul Chomo is also one of the moderators, or other moderator for the Underdog podcast community, I believe.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Phil says, "Thanks, Chris. I'm blushing." You're amazing, Phil. Thanks for being an amazing person. John said in the chat, "It's good to be proud of accomplishments and to support each other in them." And the eldest bro said he loves D&D and is actually looking at running his own story soon. So that's really cool. It's awesome that you have this.
It's a terrific idea.
Yeah. And awesome that you have this open format to be able to try these things and be flexible with what you want to do. And I think that's really important, because if you had narrowed things down a little bit, you might have got disgruntled or a bit frustrated with not having the space to be able to expand whichever way you wanted to go. And I think that's what a lot of people suffer from, keeping connected with their why and how they can make something in a way that fits their lifestyle and all of the other things that are going on, because you want people to be successful in what they do. If they're passionate about it enough to start it, it's really, good that you thought about how to make it work in a way that works for you, I guess. Sorry.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. It's not very often. I don't have very many examples in my life where I've had that level of forethought. It's just that I really did think. I sat down and I really did have some thought. Unfortunately, it worked out the way I hoped when I started my podcast, and I just realized that about myself. But I started a podcast for the same reason that many other people do, is they needed a creative outlet. But I just happened to have that epiphany at the moment when I started, that I didn't want to be pinned into a corner. I knew that I would eventually get bored with something, and so I feel very lucky that that I had that thought occurred to me. Otherwise I wouldn't have gone this far with it. I would have maybe gotten frustrated or had to start over, or who knows. But that's just the way it turned out, I guess.
Yeah. Whichever way people do take it, because I have to admit, I didn't have that much forethought, I guess, when I started my podcast, and I did too start it to have a creative outlet and a way to express myself. And it's a whole learning journey, not just about how to make a podcast and all of those things, but you really do learn a lot about yourself on this journey, and a lot about other people when you're interacting in groups and building a community around your show or with other indie podcasters like in the Underdog podcast community. You are also... Gravity Beard is also part of the Podfix network.
That's right.
Yeah. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about that? Because we've had other members of Podfix be a part of the summit as well. So I wanted to hear your perspective.
Which part of what did you want to know specifically about it?
How did you get to join Podfix network, and what have been some of the highlights that have been of being a member of that?
Sure. You know, I got to join it just because I'd gotten to know, the guys that set it up, and Podfix, like everything else in podcasting, started as one thing and then evolved into something else. And I'm not the one that started it. I got to join later, fortunately. But I think the best thing about it is it's a collection. It's a really good collection. It's a micro example of the podcast community as a whole. It's a great collection of really talented, really fun, really caring and encouraging people. So it's one of those things that I think it's greater than the sum of its parts. It's a great diverse group. It's people that are in different parts of the world doing different. I think over time the lineup of shows has become really diverse, which has been great. It started out a little more uniform, where all the shows were a little more similar, and now it's a really eclectic group, and I think that's the best thing about it and I think we're all kind of in it to support each other.
That's awesome.
There is one more thing I would say is I think it's uniquely set up. I don't have intimate knowledge of how other podcast networks are organized or run, but what I like about Podfix is that no matter how long you're in the network, you always control your own content and you control your own feed. So that's the case before you sign up, and then when you join, you still control your entire project by yourself. Nobody from Podfix is going to tell you how to run your show. They're not going to ask to run your feed, to own your feed, to control anything. You get to be part of the network and get the benefits of the network, but still have control of your art.
Yeah, that is really important, because I think that it's something that people need to seriously consider if they're going to join a network, to look at what the sort of framework is around that network, and to be able to have that creative control still, but be a part of something together is huge as indie podcasters, unless you're willing to give it up to someone else. But the network that I'm a part of, which is Geeks Rising, and they'll be joining us later this week, is the same. We remain creative control over our things, and we're just a collection of people that are passionate about the projects we're doing, and we're helping lift each other up and support each other. So that's really cool that Podfix is that for you. We've got Lisa and Sam from I Shake My Head later this week, and yeah, looking forward to talking with them again. American Liberty said he wanted to know the story behind the name Gravity Beard. If you could let us know how that came about, of naming the podcast.
Well, I'll tell as brief of a version of that as I can. So, and I think I've discovered that other people have done this too, but sometime in high school or college, you hear something funny on a TV show or a movie, or someone says something, you go, hey, that'd be a really funny band name. And so I just started a list of basically fake band names, and that list is I'm still adding to it today, and it's over 200 or 250 names, and Gravity Beard just ended up. I don't know. I don't remember the origin, the thing that sparked that, and how it ended up on the list, but it came from my fake band name list, and then the irony of a little bit about what we're discussing is that I don't know when that was. Oh gosh, it probably goes back 10 years. I was going to start a company with my former college roommate, and it was going to be an idea incubator company. This is years before I got into podcasting, and he had a tech background, and we were going to start an idea incubator company together. And we actually registered. We took that name off the band name list and registered it with the state, and formed a partnership, which never went anywhere. It ended before it started. But a few years later, when I got into podcasting, I thought, I mean, I've already registered the name. I liked it as an idea incubator before, so I just and this podcast, like I'd explained before, kind of had the same spirit behind it. And so, rather than picking another ridiculous name off the list, I just used that one. So that's how it happened. But the other thing, but the other idea behind it is that I picked that name because of the idea of wanting that creativity, not being painted into a creative corner. I wanted to pick a name that meant absolutely nothing. Kind of like, it was the idea, kind of like Google. Like, Google's not a word that means anything to anybody, and then Google gets to decide what it means to people. And so that was the idea of Gravity Beard, is that this word is nonsensical, it means nothing, and that I get to decide what it means over time.
That is a very cool origin story. And a bit of an insight too, because like he didn't know what it is reference to, and very interesting. Phil said that it just occurred to him that Paul Chomo is how he found both Chris and myself podcast, and also a couple of others on the Sunshine Summit roster. Paul Chomo is like the podcasting prophet. He does make a lot of connections. He is in a lot of groups. He's an amazing person. How did you connect with Paul Chomo?
Oh man,
Tough
I don't know if I
questions.
remember. My guess is through Twitter. I think I connected with a bunch of people through Twitter first, but I don't remember much more beyond that. But I refer to Paul as the king of the internet. He has this ubiquitous presence. He's kind of everywhere, and I don't know. I don't think he'll even be able to explain to someone how he's kind of everywhere. You run into him in all these groups in different places, and so I think it was on Twitter, but I don't remember past then. And then of course I met Phil through Blazing Caribou Studios after meeting Paul and Carrie McGinnis and everybody over there.
Yeah, Paul is in the chat,
Which,
and
by the way, Blazing Caribou is fantastic.
It is. Blazing Caribou is amazing. Paul is in the chat. Hey, Paul. He said Josh Hallmark was on Chris's show, and he reached out and said how much he enjoyed it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But I don't remember where I met. I don't remember where I met Josh either. I met Josh, and I met Paul, and I met Chris Brayton from More Gooder Than, kind of around the same time. I think I met Chris first. And those were the first group of people that I became the closest friends with in the community, and then it just went from there. But yeah, Josh was actually on a real early. That was before Curran and Ellen. I think on the interview that I did with him, he just referred to it kind of briefly. Hey, I'm going to do this project, and didn't know much more than that. And he just was conceiving of a lot of things. I think he just had our Americana at the time, and that's what I interviewed him about. And then these upcoming projects that he was about to launch.
Yeah. I think I'm a little bit the same. Some of my origin stories I can't quite recall the details of. I kind of just, once you're friends, it seems like that the rest is history. You sort of make a lot of memories along the way with each other. Phil said that Josh Hallmark is the other guy who's everywhere.
Boy, that's the truth. I agree with that. But the difference with Josh is that he's actually physically everywhere. He travels more than anybody I know in podcasting. So he's not just everywhere virtually out on the internet. He's physically everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Adam from Odd Dad Out said, if you're in podcasting, Paul is inevitable. And I think that's amazing that if you manage to cross paths with Paul. He maintains that he's actually 6 people to maintain the illusion of omnipresence.
Yeah, it's like an army of Pauls. There's not just one Paul. But I do want to say this. I don't remember my origin stories simply because I have a terrible memory. but I don't want that to be miscommunicated as those not meaning something to me, because they actually mean a lot to me. And the friends that I've made in podcasting, many of them, in fact, most of them, I've not met in person. I may never get to meet them in person, but they're as close and as dear friends of mine as people I have met in person and have known many, many years. So the relationships I've made in podcasts, I can't put a value on that. I just can't. They mean the world to me.
I wholeheartedly agree. One of the connection who couldn't make it today to the live chat is Chris Osborne, and he sent in a question to ask you. He said, you're one of his favorite people that he's met since he started podcasting. So that's firstly a compliment.
Well, that's an extremely nice. There are a lot of very, very nice people in podcasting, so that's a very kind thing to say, and I appreciate that.
And then his question was, if you were invited to entertain at a party, what would you do?
If he's asking me what I would do if I was invited to
entertain at a party.
Read the question again, if you don't mind.
If you were invited to entertain at a party, what would you do? And the party type of your choice can be the type of party that you are entertaining at can be of your choice to fit whatever you're going to entertain with.
Okay, that's not an easy question. Well, first of all, the problem is, as I mentioned earlier, that I am an introvert. So if I'm unlucky that night and I'm not in the right mood, it would be mortifying to be in charge of entertaining people at a party. I would hate that. but let's just say that I'm in the right mental, emotional space. I think I'd want to do two things. I just recently got into improv comedy. I just started taking improv classes.
Cool.
And I'm still quite terrible at it, but I love it, and I'm gradually, very, very gradually getting better each week. So I think I would either do improv, which I'd need a small group of people to do that, or I would do stand up, because I've fantasized about doing stand up comedy. I'll probably never do it, or I would just do a live version of my podcast, which I'm getting closer and closer to doing anyways. We may have some opportunities in the near future to do that, and it was very easy to come up with how I would execute my podcast live. So, and at the same time, I wouldn't want to do that alone either. I don't really like doing any of these things alone, because I just enjoy including more people, and it's just more fun that way. So I would do a group live version of my show, or one of those other two things for sure.
That is awesome. I love that. And I love the idea of collaborating, like being with others and doing it, because that's why I do the Sunshine Summit as well, is to have these conversations with other people. My show is a solo show, and I really enjoy the connection and the bouncing backwards and forward and just having conversations with others. And this kind of gives me the opportunity to do that, sort of under the pressure of being live. Sorry about that, but I really appreciate everyone who comes on and does that with me. Adam said there's an army of Paul and a cult of Heather. The summit is looking to get put on a watch list. Uh-oh.
Oh no.
I don't think so. I think it's this amazing way of like other people getting to know you, and we're celebrating with you. There are Phil and there's Paul and Adam in the chat, and Chris Osborne, who couldn't make it. He'll catch the replay afterwards. It's just this idea that connections that we make along our journey are really important. They help us get to where we are. They help us have fun. And like you said, those relationships are really important. And I agree with you that, and I can't remember the origin stories because I have a terrible memory. It's not that they're not important. But they are a part of our journey, whether they're in person or online. And online can be just as important as the ones in person. So I wholeheartedly agree with what you said earlier. Yeah. Going forward, have you had any challenges to making connections along this journey, and how have you worked through those challenges?
You know what? I don't know that I've had any challenges. I think I've found the opposite, is that people, even though we are introverts and we're doing our craft behind a microphone, usually in a room by ourselves, even if we're doing a show with other people, that we, even if it might be on our own terms, we do want to connect with other people. And so I've found that when I've reached out to connect with people have received that warmly. And so I don't know. I'd have to think really hard to think if I ever have had any challenges trying to connect with others.
Yeah. What kind of resources did you connect with along the way to help you with the Gravity Beard podcast, or podcasting in general?
Well, I think there's two pieces really. One is the creative piece, and that's coming up with ideas, and so on that note, on that part of it, I think once I started, the ideas started coming pretty freely. But then it was also really fun to collaborate and talk to other people, to either build on your idea or come up with completely new ideas. So that's kind of how that's happened, even in the beginning and then over time. And I have gone to lots of people for advice. Even now, 200 episodes in, I can't even. What do I know? 20% of what I need to know to execute a good podcast. There's so much to know and to do it better. On the technical side, I started out the way a lot of other people did. I asked the one person that I thought would know, and then so I ended up with my first round of equipment. And then when I about 40 or 50 episodes in, when I thought this thing was really going to go somewhere, I was willing to commit more money to it. So I bought better equipment. But then the problem with better equipment is that you have to know how to use it, which I didn't. And so I drove to somebody's house. I found a guy that was producing another show that I knew. Was a professional audio engineer, and I drove to his house probably, I don't know, 40 miles away several times and sat in his living room as he taught me for hours on how to use the equipment and produce a show that sounded well. So those are the resources. But then along the way, things change and evolve, and you have to keep reaching out to people and learning new things to expand. And every time you come up with a new idea, inevitably there's some sort of technical challenge that you also have to tackle. Well, you say, well, I can't do that with my current setup. Well, then how do I do it? And then you have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to do it. So I've had to do that too. But that's the great thing about whether it be the Underdog group or any other. There's groups devoted just to technical things where you could just go in there and ask your technical questions. So there's lots of resources for it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good idea to find one person that's a go-to person. If you can't get it from that person, then you take it out of the community and figure it out.
Yeah. With the creative process that you go through, and you mentioned about your list of band names that you have and you keep adding to it, is there a way that you organize or collate your creative ideas?
Yeah, I'm probably equal parts pragmatic as I'm creative, and so I run my whole show on a very detailed spreadsheet, and that's how I organize my episodes and my ideas, and it's all on one spreadsheet with about 4 or 5 different tabs. But I have this weird thing with Excel. Almost every time I come up with some sort of project, I go to Excel first to organize it. But I'm a very detail oriented and very organized person. So if I can't use a tool like that, then I'd probably be a mess, and I don't know if I could keep up with it.
I love Excel. It's nice to find another Excel person.
Oh, I'm an absolute Excel nerd. So I'm just gonna reveal that here.
That is awesome.
I'm coming out as an Excel nerd today.
So you've obviously worked out a system then for organizing that on the spreadsheet with the tabs, and that's really cool. And I love that you keep adding to it. Phil has just chimed in with people who love Excel should be committed. Thanks, Phil.
Well, I should be Excel. I should be committed for a number of reasons, not just my fascination with Excel.
Yeah. And you're right, when you do have gear and things on the technical side of it, you either eventually learn how to use what you've got, and if you add to it, you've got to go on sort of a learning journey all over again. And it's a good point about having a sort of a go-to person, and then from there branching out to the community. I know that there are a lot of questions that get asked over and over again, and like you would see that in the Underdog podcast community with new people coming in, asking questions that have been asked before. And I noticed just recently that Paul has put in, he'll tag posts with #FAQ to help people find the information that they might be looking for as a frequently asked question.
Oh yeah, some of the best ideas I've ever come up with are not my ideas. so I am very, very thankful to have people like Paul or people in my other Facebook group, both creatively and technically, and just from an execution standpoint, are always coming up with really great ideas on how to do something better. And so yeah, that's such a simple idea. Why didn't I think 2 years ago about hashtagging things with FAQ? And then Paul comes up with it a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, that's so simple and so brilliant. And so I'm always thankful when somebody does that.
But you do encourage that, like, I think even in the about of Underdog podcast community is that suggestions are welcome. Like if someone has an idea of how to make it better, you'd be open to hearing that and discussing it as a group or something and then implementing it. So it's amazing that it can adapt and that people come up with these ideas and share and help it make be a better place.
Well, and that's not to get too profound around that comment, but that's one way that I've just evolved as a person. As if you would have come across me 20 years ago, I would have been really opinionated and wouldn't have been nearly as open-minded. That's something where I've changed significantly as a person, and now I just realize how foolish it is to be the way I was before. So I've adapted this, just a completely different mindset, and I'll say yes to almost anything that makes sense. And I just realized that I know so little. So how can I possibly execute something as well as it can be executed if I'm not listening to other people's ideas? And so I'm just far less stubborn than I used to be, and I'm so thankful for that. And that's the other thing is that works on the creative side and the technical execution side. So when somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, would you do this on your show?" I don't. I've only the last say 10 or 20 times it happened. Maybe one of those ideas was a really terrible idea, and I've said yes to everything else. And
Wow.
because then it's just fun. And let's be honest. What is the real risk or downside of trying a terrible idea? Like if it doesn't work, then you've done one episode, and so what? And you live to see another day. Like there's not a big cost to doing something that's terrible at least once. Like who cares?
And if you
That's
don't do
that,
it,
that's what I
you don't. Yeah.
that's what
If you
I
don't. Sorry.
yeah. Yeah. No. What if you say no or maybe it's terrible the first time and you do it a second time, but the second time you realize your mistakes the first time. Like there's so much bigger upside to trying something out than to say no to it. So
Mhm.
that's what I
Yeah.
do.
I agree. And Tim in the chat says he agrees completely. Open mindedness is the real key to learning and growing, and it's good advice.
Yeah, well, man, I won't take credit for any good advice. I've got some, but yeah, but that is the other thing. I think another thing that'd be really fun. I almost launched another podcast on just helping people out and letting people ask advice, but I was like, how do you do that with when the spirit of the idea is to help people, but how do you do that without coming across like a know-it-all? And I'm real
Mm-hmm.
self-conscious about that. Like obviously I know a lot about podcasting, or at least a lot more than I knew 3 years ago. And I could launch a number of different types of shows, but I still, like I said earlier, just know so little compared to the total of what could be known. But I also like helping people, and I think that's what makes the group really good. Is that I can have this podcast group, and I don't have to. I'm not putting myself out there calling myself an expert, but I can step in and answer questions and offer advice the few times that I'm able to. So it kind of strikes the right balance, I guess.
Yeah. And people there in the intern group, they can share things as well. And it's kind of a journey that you're all going on together. Underdog podcast community is another journey that people are coming to. And you don't have to be the sole resource there. I think I saw that you commented that you wish you were technical enough to answer a question that someone had, but hopefully someone else popped along. I didn't follow back to see how they got on with that. I couldn't answer the question either. But
Right.
hopefully someone came back and helped them out. And yeah, having the pool of resources and other people's experiences to draw on is really, really valuable. That's what I think is amazing about that group.
Yeah, and I was really thankful when it reached just enough people that we could still be a really tight community, but there was enough people in there that we could answer most or all of the questions that came along.
Yeah. So did that take a little while to get to that point? What was that roundabout? How many people did it have to be to?
I don't remember the number. It must have been, 4, 5, 6, 700 people. And my memory is that it didn't take us that long to get there. Probably just a
Cool.
few months.
Yeah,
And so and finally people weren't just in there just to interact with each other, but they were actually getting questions answered. So I was really happy to see that.
that is awesome. If anyone in the chat has any questions that you'd like to ask Chris while he's here, put them in the chat. We would love to see them. And do you have a way of bringing people into the Underdog podcast community, or like can people invite other people to be a part of that group?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could just I think you could just whatever the invite function is on Facebook. I think you can just do it that way.
Yeah. So with that, have you got any goals or aspirations for the Underdog podcast community? And then the second question is for the Gravity Beard podcast. So goals and aspirations of where you want to get to with both of those projects.
I think the Underdog group is about where it should be. Yeah, I think making the recent changes that we made were really important, and I wish I would have recognized the need to make those changes a little bit earlier, but it doesn't seem like there's any harm done. So I'm glad we have at least made them now. So I think the group is, with those recent changes, is about where it should be, and then I think the long term goal is just, no matter how big it becomes, that we still somehow maintain, the kind of the culture and the community of the group. And it's not growing at some exponential pace. There's a few people that join a week or whatever. So it takes several weeks for even another 100 or so people to join. So it's not the growth pace doesn't make that hard to do. So I think it's about where it should be. Now, having said that, I've got some blind spots, and if there's people that are in the group that have a different opinion, or just like it says in the about page, if other people have goals or aspirations that they think that the group can achieve that it's not already, I definitely want to hear about that, and we'll try those things out. But my opinion at the moment is that the group is functioning about the way it should be.
Yeah.
Now, on the podcast side, in a way, I want it to continue to do what it's doing, which is what it was in the beginning, which is it's an open platform for myself and for others to just try things out, and it's got a wide range of things in terms of what we can execute on the show. But I think more specifically, what I'd like to do, and we're getting closer, is I would like to start doing live shows on a regular basis. We've got to get the first one done. We've got to figure out the technical aspect and just prove to ourselves that we can execute it, smoothly. And then, of course, we've got to build connections around town, where we do the show to do that. But my co-host Adam Saunders just recently moved. Now he's only 3 hours away. He used to be halfway across the country. So that is a major, profound change in how we can execute the show. That opens up a ton of possibilities. He's also in a place where we can we could do live shows where he is, as well as do them where we are. And so we're going to effort to do that. My goal is to do at least one live show before the end of the year. If that goes well, then that's something we're going to press to do several times next year. Because without going into a long explanation, one of the trade-offs for having a show that's like mine, that's very undefinable and is always something different, is that people don't know what it is, and it's hard to build an audience. And I consciously made that trade-off because I wanted it to be a creative platform and a creative outlet. But it's unlikely that I'll ever have a huge audience. If you're a niche show, that you have a much better chance of building a big audience, right? Because people know what it is, and you can communicate it more easily, and you can find it and identify your audience. If you've got a wide variety show like we have, it's just harder, unless you're famous. Like Shaquille O'Neal can start a podcast and do whatever he wants and have a huge audience. I'm not Shaquille O'Neal. I'm just some guy. So I'm trying to do it in reverse. Usually you would have a popular show and then do live shows, and you automatically have a live audience. I'm going to try to build my audience in reverse by doing live shows and building a local following in 2 different major cities, and maybe do it that way. But if that happens, that's great, but that's a secondary goal. The primary goal is, let's do a live show because it would just be fun to do a live show. I want to get a wireless mic. I want to do some crowd work because I like that kind of thing. I think it's fun to talk about inclusivity. Even the way that I would execute a live show, I would include the audience. I want audience members to be up on the mic during different segments. I want to be walking around with a wireless microphone. I want to do those types of things. And because when you go to some sort of production that's going on a stage, you don't expect to get to be involved in the show. I want to change that. I want to if you go see a podcast, it's 3 guys in a chair at microphones, and they just do their show exactly like you would hear it on the podcast. I want our live show to be unique and different from what you would listen to if you just turned it on. I want the audience to be involved because we're going to be in the audience, and that's how I want to do it.
That sounds incredible.
Sorry for the long answer.
No, that's amazing. I think that the in-person live show is going to be incredible, and it will add a huge different dynamic to it. And yeah, the engagement that you're talking about being in amongst the crowd would add so much more to the experience. And your show format does play off to that very well, because it's not sort of, you could do whatever you wanted with that. Phil said I can
do anything I want. That's right.
Exactly. I've been to live shows of other podcasts, and there have been ones where they've sat on the chairs and done it that way, and there have been ones where there is a little bit of interaction backwards and forwards, but it's still them on the stage and us back here. So that's huge. Phil said that
Well,
you've done.
the thing
Oh,
about it is
sorry.
this. Let me just say one thing.
Yep.
Let me just say this: is that when if you have your favorite band, you love listening to their record. Their record is great, but that's the studio version. When you go to the concert, you want the concert to be a bigger, more exciting experience. You want it to be different than the record. Otherwise, just stay home and put on the record, right? So the live show should offer something different than what the recorded version does, and that's what I want to try to do with our show.
That is very cool. Phil said that you've done Gravity Beard shows about music, Facebook stuff, offensive soup, etc., but it's all Gravity Beard because your brand is your personality, not the topic. Was that really conscious, or did it happen organically?
That's a great question and a really good observation. It was probably organically because I don't see myself as a personality. That's for an actual famous person. Whatever. Tom Cruise is a personality, or Dax Shepard is a personality. Fast forward 5 or 10 years, if I'm still doing this and I'm semi-famous, maybe I could consider. I don't consider myself a personality, so the answer has to be organically. Everything comes from me and who I am as a person and my own sensibilities and my own comedy style. So it's kind of a byproduct, but everything I've done is organic, and it'll continue to be that because I don't know what's around the corner. I don't know what idea is going to pop in my head that we're going to do next. It just is what it is. It's kind of the wild adventure that you're on as an audience member, and that I am as the creator, because I don't even know myself. So who knows?
Yeah. You are who you are, and that is a persona, I guess, without being like a famous person persona. And the genuineness that you have radiates out through what you do. And that's what I said at the very beginning, is why I think Underdog Podcast community is the place that it is because of your genuine wanting to help other podcasters and create a space for them that is a good place and a safe space for them to open up and share their things. So it's awesome that it's organic. Things have happened organically, and you're very modest, but you have an amazing personality that you bring to what you do. And so being there in a live thing is going to be incredible to see. It's hard for me to get out and do live stuff, and that's why I do the Sunshine Summit, is that I can bring people together from around the world, live streaming rather than in person, because New Zealand's a little bit tricky to get over to where things are. But it's cool that you would have a space where you are and your co-host is closer to be able for you to get there and do the in-person shows together. Yeah.
His move came virtually out of nowhere. It was a huge surprise. But I'm really thankful because it opens up a ton of possibilities.
Yeah. How did you connect with him?
I actually met his wife first because she was a podcaster, and I think I met her on Twitter. She was actually one of the people that I had in mind when we started the Underdog group. She was one of the, her name was Liz, and she had a show called Avoid Being Hated. It was a great show. It's not on at the moment. She may or may not bring it back. But then I think I knew Julie, who did the Station Wagon podcast, and then Paul, and then Josh, and then Chris Brayton, and then a few others. And that's who I was going to start the Underdog podcast community. It was going to be like 7 people, and now it's over 2,000. So, but yeah, so Liz had the show, and I'd co-hosted on there a couple of times, and my co-host Adam, he and a buddy of his named Andrew co-hosted their April Fool's episode, and I heard Adam on there, and I just thought he was really, really funny. Just he's got a great sense of humor, and his delivery is perfect, and he's got a great comedic sensibilities. And I don't want to go into too long of an answer, but when you start a podcast, what you realize is I don't have the energy or time to do a weekly show, but everybody tells you have to have a weekly show in order to build an audience. And so inevitably what people do is they come up with some sort of abbreviated, shorter thing to do in the off weeks. They do their normal episodes, and then every other week they do the shorter, easier thing. And then they record both of them the same day. So with 2 recordings per month, you've hopefully recorded a month's worth of content, which is mostly true. And so I tried a few things, but I was having trouble keeping up with my off weeks. And I came up with this thing called This Week Today, which the name is a complete ripoff of John, what's his name on HBO, Last Week Tonight, or whatever it's called. That's an absolute ripoff of the name. which I don't apologize for because it's a great name. And but it was supposed to be a 22 or 25 minute, basically a fake current events news show that it was super easy to produce and whatever. And I did a couple of those, and then I thought, and Paul came on one of them, and then I can't remember who else. I think Clay Groves was on one of them. But then when I heard Adam on Liz's show, I thought, man, he'd be a great co-host, and it'd be a lot easier if I didn't have to keep lining up co-hosts every week. What if I'm just going to reach out to him and see if he'd co-host my show? And I didn't know Adam at all. I'd never interacted with him whatsoever. And I reached out to him and asked if he'd co-host, and he was nice enough to say that he would. And we've done almost 80 episodes. And we're about to record our 80th episode of just the sideshow.
Wow.
So, and then there's a whole story after that, because now we're doing staff meetings and other things. Chris Brayton said, hey, you should, I will just say this because I do want credit to go where it's due. We have a hotline on our show, which a lot of people do. And the Gravity Beard Interns Facebook group was not my idea. Okay. I was out in California visiting Chris Brayton. I was staying with him for a few days, and he said, hey, you should start. He had a hotline for his show that was really, really successful. And he said, hey, you should start a hotline for your show. And I was like, again, I'm way too dismissive. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. No one's going to call the hotline number. He goes, just do it. It's going to work. It's going to be a lot of fun. In the same conversation, he said, you should start a Facebook group. And I dismissed that too. I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then a couple of weeks went by after I'd been home, and I was at work. I was supposed to be working, and I didn't want to work. And it was like 10 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, I think I am going to start a Facebook group. Actually, I started the hotline that night. Like I about faced immediately and said, okay, fine, I'll set up a hotline. I did it at his kitchen table while I was there, and it's been super fun. He was absolutely right. And then the group, I was like, I don't want to start a Facebook group. And then I was avoiding work, and I started the Underdog group, and the way I can't even take credit for that being successful, because I populated it with a bunch of, like, a couple hundred friends that I've known from all different places with all different backgrounds for the last 30 years. Childhood friends and college friends and high school friends and podcast friends and work friends. And the only idea that I had behind the Facebook group was, I just want to do this social experiment. What happens if I throw all of these people in the same place together, almost like an actual party? Like if I threw a party, invited all these friends, how would they mix socially? It was a social experiment. What if I create this stew of all these people, and the only thing in common is me? I'm the only thing. All these people know me from all these different places and times over my life. Would they interact well? Well, how would this go? And if it didn't go well, they could either just leave, they could just quit the group, or if it was a total disaster, I could just close the group down. Like, no big deal. Like, there's no harm done. And that was it. And I seeded it with a little bit of stuff that was show related. And then I think Keith Galla from Pop-Up Filmcast, and probably Paul and a couple of other people, just started, putting things on the feed. And eventually, somehow, and I think I blame Keith for this, it turned into people pretending. I'll back up one step. So Chris Brayton is the one that suggested that he call it the Gravity Beard Interns, because for a brief period of time on my show, before the credits, I was maintaining this fake narrative about how I was really struggling hiring an intern to help out on the podcast. And it went on for, I don't know, a dozen or 20 episodes. And it took like absurd, ridiculous turns, and like Bruce Jenner was involved, and it got really ridiculous. And but I just quit. I ran out of ideas, and I just stopped, and I still don't have an intern for my show. But he said, hey, you should call your group Gravity Beard Interns. And so I think Keith was the first one to latch onto it. And before I knew it, everyone was pretending that there were actual interns at a fake company. And so that became kind of the narrative and the theme behind the group. And to this day, like, people gave themselves titles and took on responsibilities. And then we were building a corporate campus, and then we've got a cafeteria, and then we've got a gym. And like, I think we've built this fictitious thing, this whole corporate campus and organization, and everyone's pretending that we're, and the great thing about it to me is that none of us have any titles except for intern. We're all interns at this company that doesn't really exist. So it's very much a combination of, I think, of the television show The Office and the TV show Seinfeld, where we work in this office together that doesn't exist, but also we have serious conversations about absolutely nothing that means nothing. So you didn't actually ask that question, but that's that's the story.
That is awesome. So one of those interns is like food interns, because I saw a hashtag food interns for a post that was recently put up.
Tiff Franks. Yeah, Tiff
Yep.
is our food turn. And
Yep.
she's brilliant. She's very, very funny.
Phil said that our library is amazing.
We have a huge library with lots of really good books.
Awesome. And Paul said that I'm grateful that he can count you as a good friend, Chris. He really has no idea how funny. He had no idea how funny and talented you were, or maybe that you have every idea and has decided that playing the humble card is the wisest move. He's pretty smart that way.
Well, first of all, that those are very kind words, and I appreciate it. But I count Paul as a dear friend too, and I've come very close to meeting him a couple times, but it hasn't happened yet. So I would return all those compliments back to Paul.
Yeah,
and it's not false modesty. I mean, I've had fun, and I'm proud of the things that I've accomplished in podcasting. But you know, it's small on the grand scale. You know, I'm having fun with the little world that we've created, and I'm happy that other people have contributed to it, and I'm happy that it's so much fun for so many people. And we'll just keep plugging along and see what happens.
Yeah. Going back a little bit, Adam said that he had a feeling of the similarity with you with the just got to find it, the Undefinable podcast. I think he's had a little trouble defining what his podcast is and what it's about, but he has this way of sharing stories and making connections through his podcast, and the Jackass of the Week and the other stuff. The things that he brings to it make it what it is, and his personality as well. So yeah, Adam's been a great supporter of a lot of things that I've done, so thank you, Adam, for that. And Phil said he wants to be there the first time that a Gravity Beard intern manages to get actual college credit for being part of that group.
I have actually considered reaching out to some local colleges. I don't really need the help anymore. I figured out how to do it without help, but I have considered reaching out to the colleges and getting an actual intern and talking the college into giving them credit. I don't know if I could do it, but it'd be funny if I could.
You have your own amazing group of interns. It sounds like it's an amazing place to hang out. One of the last questions, if anyone has any final questions to ask Chris while we're here, please pop them in now. But Chris, I've been talking with a lot of people, and I wanted to hear if you have any favorite nature connections that you enjoy, because nature is something that's kind of inherent in what I do. Sure.
I'm fascinated by your situation. I think it's super cool. if Paul and maybe even Phil too, if they're still watching the feed, I consider myself what I would call an avid indoorsman, and so I don't go out. I don't spend a ton of time outside. Not because I don't like it or appreciate it. I think I would actually really, really enjoy doing more things outside, but I'm also convinced that I'm genetically designed not to go outside. Like I've got insufferable pale skin. I've got red hair. I've got freckles. I burn like a lobster in minutes. You know, I get eaten alive by mosquitoes in brief moments. So I would love to be more of an outdoor person. I just feel like nature's conspiring against me. But there has been times when I've cycled a little bit, and when I grew up, I did a ton of swimming. I did volunteer work where I worked outside a ton when I was younger. So I do enjoy it. It's a struggle for me because I have to slather on a bunch of, sunscreen and bug repellent and all these things, and it causes me just to stay inside.
Tim in the chat said, "Oh, brother, do I know what you mean?" So he can resonate with that one. And I, for one, I love nature, but I have horrific allergies, so nature's conspiring against me too.
Yeah. Listen, I've spent a lot of time in Colorado. I've been in the Smoky Mountains. I've been in some really, really beautiful places, fortunately, and I have in those moments taken that in. I've really just soaked in those moments, and I do have an appreciation for it. But I don't spend a lot of time outside.
Fair enough. Do you have any pets? Just curiously.
Not at the. I have 4 children, so no, I don't. And we. I don't mean to. Yes, they are like pets. They're like really evolved pets, actually, if I'm honest. But we travel kind of impulsively, and that doesn't
Cool.
set up well. We couldn't take care of a pet well, with kind of the way our life works right now. So at the moment, we don't have any pets. No.
Yeah. That's cool. Thank you so much for being here today, Chris, and for sharing your stories. I highly recommend anyone who's checking out this video afterwards to check out the Underdog podcast community. If you're a new podcaster or wherever you are on your journey, amazing group of people there, and the Gravity Bird podcast. And if you manage to find the Gravity interns, you can see what shenanigans happen in there. Thank you for being a part of the summit to share your connection stories. And for everyone who came by the live chat, it was awesome to see you. And yeah, if I want to part with, if you have any advice for someone making connections, what would you say to them, Chris?
Well, if we're talking about podcasting specifically, don't be fearful about it. Just reach out, because the podcasting community is a very, very welcoming place. It's everybody's very eager to help and to support and to be encouraging, and they're just nice people. They're just nice, good people mostly. There's bad apples in every bunch, but on the whole, it's just a really good group of people. And they're creative and energizing, and so the advice is simple, and that's just to reach out, just jump in, because more than likely you're gonna be received really well.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you again for coming. Thank you for that advice. And for everyone, I look forward to seeing you in the next stream that we have for the Sunshine Summit. And until next time, be empowered by nature.
Yes.
Yeah.
Heather, thank you so much for letting me be here.
You're welcome. See you, bye. Oh, wait, hang on. On the note of actually making connections, Chris, I had this page, which I was meant to show because Tim said he's going to check out both for sure. This is how you can do it. The Gravity Beard's on Twitter and Instagram, but there is Gravity Beard on Facebook, and the groups search for UnderDogPods, and gravitybeard.com is your website, I believe.
Yes, it sure is.
Cool. Sorry about that. I forgot that I had that page.
No, that's quite all right. No big deal.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.